Hi, this is Ron from Super 8 to Video. Getting the best picture with scenes taken indoors with Super 8 and 8mm is what this tutorial is about. I find indoor scenes very difficult and time-consuming. I will give you a few pointers on what I have learned. Remember, Super 8 is a hobby of mine, and I still have a lot to learn. I have already loaded a video with 6 exposure settings on the Wolverine. Plus 0.5 is the brightest exposure shown, and minus 2 is the darkest exposure shown. The plus 1, 1.5, and 2 are not shown. These settings were too bright to do anything with anyway. It is counterintuitive, but many times I find the darker settings to be the better light exposure settings to use with indoor scenes with the Wolverine. If you will notice, it is not until minus 1.5 before the white balance begins to naturally get close to correct. However, the minus 2 is even more correct, and the white wall is no longer overexposed. See how the plus 0.5 is way too yellow. It is also too yellow even at minus 1. Because I am only going to work with the plus 0.5 and the minus 2, I am going to delete the other films. I am also going to delete the title that tells you which is the plus 0.5 and the minus 2. This also removes what I call the line blanket that covers the sprocket hole from showing. Just remember the one up here is the brightest and the one down here is the darkest. I am doing this because when Video Studio Pro plays all 6 of these videos with all the cropping filters and the color balance filters, and remember, the computer is capturing the picture as all 6 films play for this tutorial, it brings my computer down to its knees. Here is the dilemma. The background is really quite good, but if you notice, the people's faces need to be brightened, at least here on the minus 2 setting. Up here, where the brightest setting is, the color balance is way off and the background is overexposed, but the people's faces can be seen much better. We will start down here where the color balance is naturally more correct, but the people's faces need to be brightened. I find it is almost always best to pull the gamma up in dark scenes instead of the brightness. See, this is what brightness does. Now, let's reset it, and we will pull the gamma up to 58. Remember, I have already fiddled with the different settings and know what I was most happy with on both the minus 2 exposure and the plus 0.5. Now, let's play the film for a few seconds. Stop. Here is what it looks like before I raised the gamma. Now, let's put the gamma up again, but notice how the shadows get a blue tint to them when I raised the gamma. To improve that, I used the FX filter color balance. I put the color balance filter on red 0, green 0, but notice I set the blue on minus 30. Now let's close this down. When I click on this eye, it turns the color balance on and off. When the eye is shown, it means you can see your changes. Notice how when I turn the eye off, it gets a bluish tint again in the shadows. It is subtle, so look close. I will do it again. So now let's play the film from the beginning. Now let's do some changes to the plus 0.5 film. First, I will set the white balance temperature to 2300. Now I am going to raise the gamma to plus 42. To get rid of the bluish tint, I set red to 0, 0 for green, and minus 65 for blue in the color balance filter. Let's close this down and play the film. Now let's play both films so we can compare them. If you notice, you can see the people better in the brightest film, but the color balance is still way off and the background is blown out. The -2 has a better background, but the man's face is still really dark. So that is the dilemma, and I do not know of any really good solution. I mostly did this tutorial because you may not know that you can often get better exposure settings on dark scenes by setting it on a darker exposure. It is counterintuitive. I also wanted you to be aware of the color balance filter. I find this filter to be useful with some films that are too red, too green, or too blue. Hope you found this tutorial useful. This is Ron of Super 8 to Video, signing off.